Welcome to part 2 of episode 3 of The Chain, the evolution of Fleetwood Mac. In part 1, we discussed the Rumors album, and unfortunately, we're not able to discuss everything that was in the Rumors album. But Jeff, you have a good piece of information to provide a little bit more insight into the Rumors album, don't you?
Yes, I do, Sean. Sorry guys, we couldn't get into the full detail of that album, making of it. But if you're interested in wanting to learn more, there is a great book by the recording engineer on this album, Ken Kelly, who recorded 3 albums with Fleetwood Mac. And the book is called Making Rumors. I have read it. It's an excellent read. It talks about every little detail that happened from the beginnings of the recording to the end. And there's nice little stories in there from the recording sessions to some of the stuff on the road. And he gives a background to how each track was made, the fights, stories, everything that went on in this album. Ken Kelly talks about it, and it's a really, really great read, and I highly recommend it.
And now we're going to discuss the difference between Rumors and the next album, which was Tusk, which didn't exactly receive the same warm welcome from Fleetwood fans that Rumors did.
No, it didn't. Tusk was something of an experimental album. It was very different than anything else at the time. What happened was, the band was on the Rumors tour, and while they were in the UK, Lindsey had begun to listen to punk music. And at this time, punk was a new thing in music. It was a new wave. It was getting started in the underground of London. And while they were on tour in the UK, Lindsey stopped by a performance rehearsal for The Clash. He checked them out, and he liked what they were doing. And this is funny because The Clash had, at the time, slammed Fleetwood Mac for being the part of the old rock establishment and being controlled. And, punk music, at the time was all about doing your own thing and not being controlled by anyone.
Fight the power.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's funny because in Lindsey Buckingham actually was inspired by them. He particularly had listened to the Clash and the Talking Heads, too. And this influenced the sound of Tusk. Lindsey was really afraid that the band was becoming dinosaurs. He was afraid that they were going to be no longer relevant to the music sound, and he wanted them to experiment musically, and he encouraged everybody, we have to try new things, and he did not want to go back into the studio to make Rumors Part 2. Everybody else would have wanted him to, but he goes, no, we're going something different. We're doing something totally different, and the band was pretty much on board for that. Tusk was his baby. This is his big project, and it's also been often compared to the Beach Boys album Pet Sounds, which was, when it was released, considered to be an experimental album. And it's also known that Lindsey Buckingham is highly influenced by Brian Wilson's arrangemental style, and he's an influence on Lindsey. And Lindsey was given complete creative control over the album, and they began to record in late 1978, towards the end of the Rumors tour. And everybody contributed so many songs to this album. It ended up becoming a double album. And there's 20 tracks on Tusk. Rumors only had 11. This is 20 tracks. And this whole album is very different from anything that was done before. Lindsey had started something where he actually would start working on the tracks at home. He would record everything from the drums to the bass to the vocals, and he could bring all these songs half finished, and then basically tell the band what part he wanted to play. And basically, there wasn't a whole lot for them to do. Whereas Rumors in the previous album was a group effort. This is more like Lindsey putting stuff together, and he would tell them when to come in to the recording studio to play this part or do this and that. And we're gonna play you a couple songs from Tusk to just sort of compare it to Rumors. And we're gonna play you a song that Lindsey wrote called "The Ledge," and this is a really interesting one. those little segments from the Tusk album, and some very interesting songs indeed. Very different from Rumors on a whole nother scale. The Ledge. What do you think of that one, Sean?
Unique. That's really the only word that kind of comes to mind when I think about it. Not something that, personally, I don't know if I'm going to sit down and listen to that piece by first choice if I had to pick any Fleetwood song, as well as Tusk. Although Tusk, very, very unique, having University of Southern California marching band in the background, which to me was actually pretty neat. But again, musically, didn't really know what was going on in Fleetwood. It seemed like it was kind of just the USC Trojan marching band show, which, if you're a marching band fan, definitely not a bad thing. However, if you're a Fleetwood fan, you're kind of wondering, where's the band?
Yeah, the thing is, this was the only song on Tusk that was recorded live at Dodger Stadium. In fact, there's actually a sort of music video before there was music videos, or that shows the band recording it at Dodger Stadium. The only member of the band who was not there for this session was John McVie. There was a cardboard cutout of him there. He actually already laid down the bass track before they actually recorded this live. Tusk was an interesting track. Yeah, if you hear the song, I'm pretty certain the vocals in the background are pretty much all Lindsey Buckingham. There's not much of anybody else except maybe Mick Fleetwood. As far as the USC marching band being in this song, that was Mick's idea to have them in there. Tusk was the riff that the marching band plays was actually born out of a riff that Lindsey and Mick would jam to during sound checks before their shows. And
that's an interesting fact. I mean, just listening to that band, the USC marching band play, I mean, that's something that you could almost imagine in a halftime show. You see the band kind of rocking out, doing a park and bark or a standstill where they're kind of just letting loose and having fun. To me, that's what that sounded like.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like very much like a halftime show. In fact, I think the USC marching band still does this to this day during their halftime shows. I'm sure they still do it. And when the band actually reconvened in 1997 for their dance performance, when they performed Tusk, the USC marching band appeared with them to do this song. There's a couple of things I think instrumentally going on in Tusk. I believe there's an accordion in there somewhere. I think by Christine McVie. I know in the live version there's an accordion in there. And as far as the Ledge, this is a slight stylistic change. Every track you heard on Ledge, it was all done by Lindsey Buckingham. The backing vocals are all Lindsey. He has his voice sped up and slowed down at different points to sound like there's multiple people in there, but it's pretty much all him. All guitars, bass, drum, it's all him. And yeah, this was a big change because the rest of the band didn't have much to do on Tusk. And he was kind of left to do his thing, and when he wanted them to do something, he would call them in. It's a very interesting album. It's very different. I will admit, Tusk was not a favorite of mine when I first listened to it. I did not like the album. However, it has grown on me over the years. It has some pretty good tracks. I Know I'm Not Wrong, What Makes You Think You're the One, Sarah, Never Make Me Cry, and Never Forget Tonight. There's a lot of good songs on the album for 20 tracks. It's pretty good. Oh, and Think About Me is another good one, too. But another thing on the album was that it was not well received when it was released. In fact, when it first came out, both fans and critics were a little shocked by what they heard because this was something totally different for Fleetwood Mac, and it was not what anyone expected. And critics kind of slammed the album and said, really, the whole thing sounds like a bunch of solo projects by the three lead singers. There's no unity in this because each track by each artist has its own sound. Sounds unique just to that artist, where there's not a whole lot of contributions going on between the rest of the band members. And the critics also said the album was overtly self-indulgent on the part of Lindsey Buckingham. It's a little slam on him there. And although fans didn't warm up to it right away, they still bought it, and many did like it. Warner Brothers, on the other hand, was disappointed in the album and in the sales. Although Tusk did sell about 4 million albums, it failed to reach the level that Rumors had done. And it created 2 top 10 singles with Tusk and Stevie Nicks' Sarah. Those are the top 10 hits from that album, but it just could not eclipse the sales and the success of Rumors. And just because it was not Rumors Part 2, which is what they wanted, they deemed it a failure and placed all blame on the shoulders of Lindsey Buckingham, and basically said it was his fault.
Well, when you kind of take the reins and do things like Buckingham did with pretty much playing the entire song by himself and only needing the band when he deemed it necessary for them to come in, the blame is going to be placed on his shoulders because he kind of took over the project. And like we said earlier in the podcast, with Rumors being so popular, part of that was probably due to the fact that it was such an insight into the lives of the musicians writing and playing those songs, whereas the Tusk album seemed kind of just to be the Lindsey Buckingham show. He did kind of take over, and without the reception and the insight into the band's lives during this time, I think that's kind of what hurt the sales for this album.
It did, yeah. Tusk took a long time to become a popular album. In fact, it's actually regarded as one of the best experimental rock albums to this day, and it's very well liked by many. In fact, there was a musician called Camper von Beethoven who actually took to recording the entire, covering the entire album from start to finish and all the tracks. I've not heard his version of it, but I know that he's known to have done it. Tusk has been re-released several times with multiple bonus tracks and outtakes, rough cuts and stuff recently, and I have bought that. It's for the 2015 reissue of Tusk, and it's pretty good. I do like it. I don't like every track on the album, but it's a nice one. Peter Green also made a brief uncredited appearance on this album by playing the guitar on Brown Eyes, which is a Christine McVie song, but you can't hear him until the song's starting to fade out, and then you start hearing some of his guitar work. I have listened to that song, and I still can't tell it's Peter Green in there. Whatever reason, but he's on it. But it, just uncredited. I mean, maybe somebody else who's a very Peter Green fan could probably pick it out, but I had trouble picking it out. Despite the Tusk sales were not being as great as they could have been, Fleetwood Mac was still quite popular, and they went on the road for another big tour. Although this tour was not as long as Rumors, it went for about maybe 11 months, almost a year though. And it started like late 1979, and then it did not end until September of 1980. But by the time this Tusk tour began, they were swimming in money. Like, they were rich. I mean, like, every band member had a limousine waiting for each one of them and their entourages. Instead of riding together in one, they all had each their own limousine waiting for them. And, they had a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of drugs were flying around at this time. Particularly cocaine was the big one. And, in fact, both Stevie Nicks and Mick Fleetwood had developed a dependency on the drug. And in fact, I have read on several accounts that before the band would go on stage, they would all take one little snort of cocaine just to give them the energy to get through, because they were basically being run ragged through these shows. And plus, the scars and the wounds from the Rumors album sessions were still very apparent. So they kind of need something to kind of lift their spirits through the shows.
And what better than cocaine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just the way... There's definitely a little bit of a drug influence on this album, I believe, just by the way it sounds. Although Tusk is quite impressive for what it was.
And as we know from past drug and alcohol dependencies in the band's history, this is nothing new to Fleetwood Mac.
No, and in fact, but and as proven before, drugs would definitely prove to be a very negative factor in this band, and it would definitely tear down the lives of some of the members of this band, which we will get to in our next podcast. But when the tour concluded in 1980, the band, they basically had been going since 1975 consistently when they joined, when they started up again. But by the end of 1980, they were all tired, they just needed a break from everything, and mostly because they needed a break from each other. They just want to get away from the five themselves. And so the band kind of went on a hiatus for a little while, and it was during this time that Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks and Mick Fleetwood started to look into doing some solo projects. And the status of Fleetwood Mac at this point was kind of put on hold for a little while.
And we will discuss that on episode 4 of The Chain, The Evolution of Fleetwood Mac. We will also talk about the band's struggle to stay together throughout the 80s, the triumphant return, and yet another change in the lineup of Fleetwood Mac. For Jeff Coast, I'm Sean Stewart. See you next time on The Chain, The Evolution of Fleetwood Mac.